At 10:30 on the morning of October 30th, 1942, Lieutenant Commander Hershel Albert Smith stood on the battered flight deck of the USS Enterprise, watching sparks dance in the air as 75 construction battalion men welded heavy steel plates over bomb craters that should have sent his ship to the bottom 4 days earlier. The Enterprise, CV-6, 25,000 tons, 824 feet long, the most decorated warship America would ever send to sea, lay wounded in the quiet waters off Noumea. She had survived the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands with 2 direct bomb hits, 75 men wounded, and 44 dead. Her forward elevator was jammed halfway between decks like a frozen vertebra in an injured spine. Her hull bulged outward on the starboard side where near misses had slammed underwater shockwaves into her plates. A fuel tank still wept oil into the Pacific. According to every Navy regulation and inspection standard, she should have been heading for a shipyard for months of repairs. But the Pacific had no shipyard to spare. And there were no more American carriers left to take her place. Lexington had gone down in flames at Coral Sea. Yorktown had died at Midway. Wasp had been torpedoed 2 months earlier. And Hornet, Enterprise's last operational partner, had been sunk just 4 days before at Santa Cruz. Saratoga sat in Pearl Harbor, crippled by torpedoes. That left only Enterprise, tired, wounded, patched with scrap steel, the lone American aircraft carrier still afloat in the entire Pacific Ocean, the last ship standing between the Japanese Navy and domination of the Solomon Islands. The Japanese knew it. In fact, they had already declared Enterprise sunk 3 separate times over the previous 10 months. First after the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August, then again after Santa Cruz, and earlier still after previous engagements. And each time, Enterprise emerged from the haze of battle to fight again, limping but defiant, earning a nickname whispered with disbelief in Tokyo, the Gray Ghost, the ship that refused to die. Lieutenant Commander Smith had been Enterprise's damage control officer since April. Naval Academy, Class of 22, a Michigan man with the quiet intensity of someone who understood ships from keel to mast. He knew Enterprise better than most people knew their childhood homes. Every frame, every bulkhead, every valve, every junction box, every duct. He had crawled through spaces so tight they required turning your skull sideways just to squeeze through. When something on the ship broke, Smith didn't need to open a blueprint. He could see the anatomy of the damage in his mind, like a surgeon visualizing a fracture beneath the skin. And he trained his men, dozens of them, to operate the same way. Drills at sunrise, drills at dusk, drills in storms, drills on calm seas. Fire, flooding, explosive shock, electrical failure. They practiced until their instincts acted faster than fear. When the first Japanese bomb struck Enterprise during the Eastern Solomons in August, Smith didn't even wait for a report. He felt the shudder through the steel deck, saw smoke boiling upward, and sprinted down ladders into the suffocating heat below. He found flames spreading fast, electrical power severed, wounded sailors piled against a bulkhead. He barked orders through smoke and chaos, and his teams moved like a machine. Seal this hatch, shore up that frame, reroute power, flood this compartment to save that one. Enterprise lived. At Santa Cruz, 2 bombs and 2 near misses hit her within 5 brutal minutes. Smith was below decks when the first one detonated. The second blasted him against a metal wall, ringing his skull, numbing his hands, but he kept going. Fires spread across multiple decks. Debris trapped men. Flooding crept toward magazines that could have blown the ship apart. Yet still, Smith's voice cut through everything like a knife. His men trusted him, and their trust kept Enterprise afloat. Now in Noumea, the repair work lasted 4 days. Smith organized the efforts of 75 Seabees, construction workers, not warship specialists, but they had skills he could harness. Welders burned through mountains of electrodes. Carpenters carved plugs for jagged holes in the flight deck. Mechanics improvised a crude, cable and pulley workaround for the jammed elevator. Nothing was elegant. Nothing was pretty. But everything worked well enough to get Enterprise fighting again. On November 11th, before repairs were anywhere near complete, Enterprise had to sail. Japanese battleships were steaming toward Guadalcanal to annihilate Henderson Field and retake the island. The Marines on the ground were exhausted, starving, and holding on by threads of willpower. If the Japanese succeeded, the Solomon Islands, and possibly the entire South Pacific, would fall. Captain Osborne Hardison, who had been in command for just 10 days, stared at the damage reports, then at Smith. "Can she fight?" he asked. Smith didn't sugarcoat anything. The forward elevator was unreliable. Hull integrity was compromised. A hit in the wrong place could sink Enterprise in minutes. But the engines worked. The steering worked. The catapults could launch aircraft. She could fight. They sailed at dawn, with welders still hammering, sparks still flying, and oil still seeping into the sea. On November 12th, Enterprise launched her first mission into the storm of the Guadalcanal campaign. Her pilots were worn thin. Some squadrons had lost half their men at Santa Cruz. But every surviving aircraft lifted off the deck and disappeared into the rolling Pacific clouds. Hours later, they found Japanese cruiser Kinugasa. She was retreating northwest after bombarding Henderson Field the night before. Enterprise's dive bombers rolled in from 12,000 feet, slicing through anti-aircraft bursts to plant bombs on her decks. One exploded near the bridge, killing her captain instantly. Fires mushroomed across her hull. More Enterprise planes arrived. More bombs fell. Kinugasa died at 1:45 in the afternoon, taking over 500 sailors with her. That night, November 12th rolling into the 13th, American cruisers and destroyers fought the Japanese battleship Hiei in a point-blank, midnight maelstrom off Savo Island. The range was so close some shells pierced ships clean through without detonating. Hiei, built to crush entire flotillas, was hammered into a crippled wreck. By dawn she limped north at 8 knots, just fast enough to give the illusion of escape. Enterprise launched her first strike before sunrise. Dive bombers hit Hiei from altitude. Torpedo planes roared in at wave-top height, dropping explosives that slammed into her port side. Henderson Field's Marine pilots joined the assault. Army B-17s dropped bombs from high above. Wave after wave tore her open. By late afternoon, the Japanese abandoned ship. At 6:15 p.m., demolition charges sent the once proud battleship slipping beneath the sea. But the fighting didn't stop. On the 14th, Japanese troop transports, 11 of them, pushed south with 10,000 soldiers ready to retake Guadalcanal. Enterprise found them early in the morning. Dive bombers fell on them like hawks. The transports were floating powder kegs, stuffed with fuel, ammunition, artillery, tanks. When bombs struck, they vanished in towering geysers of flame. Marine aircraft joined. Army bombers joined. One after another, the transports sank. Men thrashed in burning seas. By mid-afternoon 7 were gone. 4 more staggered onward through the night, burning like floating torches. They beached themselves at dawn on November 15th. Soldiers stumbled ashore with barely any equipment. Artillery, tanks, ammunition, almost all lost to the sea. Fewer than 2,000 reached land with weapons. That same night, November 14th into the 15th, came the final, decisive surface duel. American battleships Washington and South Dakota met Japanese battleship Kirishima in a brutal nighttime brawl. When South Dakota drew Japanese fire, Washington saw her chance and unleashed her 16-inch guns. Shells the size of motorcycles slammed into Hiroshima again and again. She burned, twisted, broke, and was scuttled past midnight, the second Japanese battleship destroyed in 3 days. By sunrise, Guadalcanal was secure. The Japanese offensive was shattered. And Enterprise, the battered, leaking, half-repaired Enterprise, had been there for every moment. When Captain Hardison sent his report on November 16th, he praised the skillful, well-trained, and energetically enthusiastic crews who had kept Enterprise operational despite everything. Admiral Halsey himself sent a message commending the Seabees, the welders, carpenters, and mechanics who had fought the war with sparks, hammers, and sweat. But the deeper truth was simpler. A single damaged carrier, kept alive by one extraordinary damage control officer and 75 construction men, had helped destroy 2 battleships, a heavy cruiser, 7 transports, and had saved Guadalcanal. The Japanese never launched another major offensive there. By February 1943, they evacuated the island entirely. Guadalcanal became an American stronghold for the rest of the war. And Enterprise, this ship that had already been written off again and again, sailed on. She had missed the attack on Pearl Harbor by 1 day and arrived to see smoke still rising from the ruins. Her planes had drawn first blood, sinking a Japanese submarine in December 41. She raided island chains across the Pacific in early 1942. She escorted Hornet during the Doolittle raid. She fought at Midway, launching the dive bombers that found Japanese carriers at the perfect, miraculous moment when the enemy's decks were covered with armed aircraft and fueled bombs, leading to explosions that changed the course of the war. Through every battle, every near-death blow, every moment of fire and steel, Enterprise endured. She refused to die. And in those 4 desperate November days off Guadalcanal, she proved once and for all that even the most battered ship can change the destiny of a war.